Hello everyone and welcome back to Just Finish Coding. This is part 8 of our Geometry Dash series on Scratch 3. In case you've not watched parts 1 to 7, I will leave a card for you right here. Now in those parts we did quite a bit of code. In this video we'll be making sure our player completely flies, and we'll also be making sure that his ground particles show up to indicate the friction. So let's get right into it. I'm going to pick up where we left off in the last video, which is in our air engine right here. So you can remove the set y to y position, and in its place you can put in an if else, and within the if condition what we'll first be checking is if we're touching any of the obstacles. So you know that there are two types of obstacles. One is the ones which are visible and the other is the ones which are not visible. So head over to sensing, grab a touching mouse pointer and change that to visible obstacles, then duplicate that and change that to be invisible obstacles. And there we go, we need this within the if else, and within this if statement all we need to do is say set game over to yes. If you remember, we did this exact same thing within the ground engine. It's the same logic here. So set game over to yes, and now we can head over to the else statement. Now we can grab once again an if else from the control category, because we'll be doing something again very similar to the ground engine. Actually I think it was in the Y engine as well as the ground engine, but this is what I'm referring to. So we first have an if we're touching floors, then we check if we're touching platforms, although we're doing very similar things, and then we basically conclude. So let's start with the floors. First of all, let us check if we are touching the floors. In this case, we'd basically want to come to a standstill at that particular location. But also remember that within the floor sprite, if you head over to the costumes, you'd see that the flying floor has a costume in the air itself. So it's going to be at the top and at the bottom. So we're going to have two different case scenarios here. So the first case is if the player is going up, and the second case is if the player is going down. Now we can distinguish these two using once again an if else, and you just wait for me to do this, or you'll start to see where I'm going. And within this if else, we'll simply be checking if the y velocity is greater than 0. Very simple. So in case I'm going to do less than first. In case it is less than 0, then all we'd want to do is we'd want him to move back up. So we'd want him to raise, go up back to exactly the position where he's not yet touching the ground. So to do that, all we have to do is change y by 1 until he's no longer touching. So head over to motion, grab a change y by, put that to be a 1, and also remember that we have two different variables that we are using, and those are the touching ground and the touching ceiling variable. Now that we've touched the ground, we can set the touching ground variable to yes. Okay, so set touching ground to yes. And this doesn't have to happen just once, right? This has to happen multiple times. So to make sure that all of this happens, till we are no longer touching the ground, we need to make sure we put that into a repeat until. So grab a repeat until. We can put this entire if else within that, because even in case of the else statement, we'll just be doing the opposite of this. And here we'll just say repeat until not touching floors. Okay. Very simple. Now let's duplicate this within the inner else, and let's change this to touching ceiling, and let's change y by -1 so that he comes right at the point where he's no longer touching that ceiling. That's pretty much it, other than the fact that we need to set the y velocity back to 0, because at this point, we just want to reset everything. So I'll be a little bit careful about where you're putting it. You need to make sure you put it two yellow boxes outside. It's basically within this, not within this if then, but it's within this, it is within this if then, but it's not inside this repeat until. Okay, so just be a little bit careful there. So here we are setting y velocity to 0. That's pretty much it. Now we can head over and do pretty much the same thing in case we're touching the platforms. I think it's a little more efficient just to duplicate this once. So let's say if touching platforms in this case, change this to platforms. And also here to platform. So we repeat until we're no longer touching the platform, and we're going to do the same thing once again. Now we have this final else statement which we don't really need. So to fix that, you can head over to the control section, grab an if else, and just change all of this from an if else to an if then. we don't really even need that else statement right there. Now remember that we still have this block which says set y to y position. We're going to use that block. So you know that in case we are touching either the visible obstacles or the invisible obstacles, we're going to end the game. And we'll be doing this if that is not the case. So just put it one layer of yellow before the end, and this will make sure that your flying engine works. Let's try this out. So we are using the trampoline, boom, and okay, so something is very wrong. So you can see that the player is still coming down for some reason, and he's no longer really touching the platform. So I will check my code once and I will find the error, and then I will be right back. Alright, so I did find my error. It turned out to be fairly simple. So what I was really doing was I was repeating until we touched the floor, and we were already doing that. So this was basically pointless, and all we're doing was setting the y velocity to 0, which basically repeated this cycle, and we kept going down. So to fix this, you simply need to add in a knot in both of these cases. So grab in 2 knots. In the first case, we can see repeat until we're not touching the floors, and in the second case, we can repeat until we're not touching the platforms. And that's pretty much it. So now if we do hit the green flag and then we try it out, you can see that boom, obviously that motion wasn't the most fluid motion, but you can see that it does work out. You can see that we do fall on the platforms and things work out pretty neatly. Now, before I do end this video, I will also be coding in something called the player particles, and you can click on that sprite right here. I will probably bring this up because I'm going to do this in this video, and I'll be doing the flying particles in the next, so I'll probably bring them both up. The player particles are going to be visible when the player is moving on the ground in the ground mode, and the flying particles are going to be visible when the player is flying in air mode. So let's start with the player particles. Let us start with a when I receive init. So head over to events, grab a when I receive init, and just as usual, we'll be deleting every single clone that exists. So repeat one time and you can see it delete this clone. Next, we can go ahead and hide this particular sprite. Let's also create the clone variable which we use for every sprite. So call this clone followed by a question mark for this sprite only. Let's set clone to be yes initially, because at this point we'll be creating the clones. Set clone to yes. After this, let us grab a repeat 15 because we'll have 15 of these guys. So 15 different clones, repeat 15, create a clone of myself, and it's going to be it. When we're creating the clone, they're all going to be random, so let's do that in the clone itself. After this, what I will do is I will simply set the clone variable back to no, because the sprite isn't a clone and we do not want it to follow our instructions. So there we go. Now let's start with the clone properties. So let us grab a when I start as a clone from the control category, and here I'll be using a simple block to make sure things go faster. So I will call this block reset clone. I think it's pretty fitting to call it that. You don't have to run without screen refresh, or you can just click OK. Within this, let me actually just put this first here. Within this, we will first of all go to the player because we need to be near the player pretty much all the time. So you can grab a go to random position from the motion category and change that to player. So once we've gone to the player, we need to move slightly to the left of the player since the player is moving, scrolling towards the right. So to do that, you can simply say change X by something and change Y by something. Now, since we want the particles to show on the left, we need to change X by some negative number. In my case, I'm going to go ahead with -20, but you can play around with this number. And for the Y-axis, I'm going to go ahead with -10 because I want them to be, coming up, basically. After this, what we can do is set our ghost effect to be something of a semi-transparent ghost effect. You wouldn't want to set it fully transparent because then you can't see them. Setting it to a semi-transparent effect makes sense. So I'm going to use a random pick here. You can grab a pick random 2 from operators. I'm going to choose the values 10 to 50. Those things make quite a lot of sense to work out with. After this, let us also point in some random direction so our particles move pretty uniquely, but we've got to be careful here. So you can grab a point in direction first of all, and now we need a pick random because we need to move in some random direction. However, we need to move it within some range. So we do not want the particles to be going below the ground, nor do we want the particles going straight above or to the player's right. So to do that, we need to set up a range of acceptable values. In my case, it's going to be -75 to -90. Now -60, -90 might work for you as well, but I would highly recommend you to go with these values. So once you're done with this, let's create another variable for the sprite only, and I'm going to call this variable vel, standing for velocity, and I'm going to make some of these particles move faster than others and some of them move slower than others. So let us set velocity here to pick random once again. Here I'll be setting 6 to 10. Okay, so it's a smaller range of possible velocities. And that's pretty much it. We just need one more simple check. And I'm not sure if I even set this variable. I think I did. It's called has jumped. Yep, I did. So let me head back to the player particles here. In case the has jumped variable is equal to yes, then we'll basically hide ourselves. Okay, since the player is not touching the ground anymore. So we can say if head over to I believe sensing and grab this backdrop of stage. So you can change the stage to be the player, and you can change X position to be what is the variable? Yeah, has jumped. So you can head over to operators now, grab an equal to, and say if has jumped of player is equal to yes. And if this is the case, then we will simply hide ourselves. But if this isn't the case, then we will simply show ourselves. Very, very simple, and that's pretty much all you need within this block. Okay, so now we'll simply need to code in the tick program of it, which is much simpler actually. So head over to events, grab a when I receive tick, grab a when I receive init, change it to when I receive a tick. And let's start by ensuring that this only happens in ground mode. So grab an if else, head over to operators, say equal to, and this only happens if mode is equal to ground. Very simple. If this is not the case, then all we need to do is hide. We do not want the player particles to be showing, because at that point it's the flying particles which we'll want to show. Next we'll be checking if the clone variable is set to yes. This time you can simply use an if else. You don't really if then you don't need to use an if else. So change this to if clone is equal to yes. In this case, all we do is simply move velocity steps. So move velocity steps. And we also need to do one more thing, which is to change our ghost effect by 10 so that the particles become gradually transparent. So change the ghost effect by 10. That's pretty much it. You also need to do one more thing because this the ghost effect is eventually going to get to 100, and by then it's going to be completely transparent. So we need to make sure that at some point we delete this clone and we basically reset it, or just reset the clone. I'm going to just reset it. Okay, so head over to control, grab an if then, because this is going to be a one-time condition. So we can say if grab a less than, because this is going to be pretty crucial. So we can say if the X position of this particular particle is less than the X position of the player. And remember, we can use the same trick. So head over to sensing. Oops, I didn't mean that. Head over to sensing, change that to player, and you can just use this X position variable. So if the X position of the player -70, so -70 is greater than the X position of the particle, then we simply want to reset things. So let's actually look at what this means. The particle is going to be constantly moving towards the left, and maximum this is going to be it's going to be 12 times before this happens, and minimum it's going to be 7 times, right? Because 12 6 are 72, which is more than this, and 7 10s are 70, which is again going to fulfill this condition. So basically we're moving more and more to the left until this condition is satisfied, and once it is, we're resetting the clone. So head over to right now head over to looks, grab a hide, and we can simply use the reset clone block, and that just saves us a lot of time. And that's it. This is going to be all we need for the player particles. And now let me reset the X value for the player, which I changed so that the flying was easier. So you can remove that set X to 2300, just set it to -152. And now when we test our code, you can see that boom, we have our player particles. And that already looks pretty fascinating, right? It's pretty cool that we have those particles. There's a lot of things to do. There's the flying particles, and then we need to get into the collisions and so forth, but this is quite a bit of progress. If you've enjoyed this video, please make sure you leave a like, and also don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.